It started like any other day. The sun was out, the birds were chirping, and I was enjoying my usual cup of coffee on the back porch. My yard, a peaceful little patch of green I'd worked hard to maintain, was a perfect escape. Quiet, calm, and completely mine, until that peace was shattered by the unmistakable sound of laughter. Not just one or two voices, but a group, loud, cheerful, and getting louder. I stood up and walked a few steps to get a better view. And that's when I saw it. People, strangers, in my backyard. There were chairs set up, a folding table loaded with snacks, a big pink and white banner fluttering in the breeze, and a Bluetooth speaker blaring music from patio. My grill, which I hadn't used in weeks, was somehow cleaned off and being fired up by a man I'd never seen before. And there, in the middle of it all, laughing like she owned the place, was Karen Starr. Now, I wish I was making that name up. But no, she's a kind of neighbor who earned the nickname. You know the type, always peeking through her curtains, reporting every little thing to the HOA, and acting like she's queen of the cul-de-sac. I'd had a few run-ins with her before, mostly passive-aggressive stuff. She once left a note on my door because my trash bins were out too early. Another time, she complained about the height of my lawn. But I never expected this level of boldness. Hosting a full-blown party in someone else's yard? I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I walked straight over, doing my best to stay calm. "Karen," I said, keeping my voice steady, "what is going on here?" She turned around like she was surprised to see me. "Oh, I didn't think you'd be home today," she said, as if that made it okay. I blinked. "This is my yard." She gave me that tight-lipped smile she's famous for. "Technically," she said, "it's part of the shared HOA green space. You never really use it, so I figured it'd be perfect for a little get-together." Shared green space? That was a new one. I live in a standalone home. My property line is clear, and this yard is clearly mine. But Karen? She's a master of bending reality to suit her needs. And now she had guests here, eating chips and sipping wine, like it was totally normal. I glanced at the people around her. Some looked a little uncomfortable now, watching us. Others just kept on chatting. I asked her again, firmer this time, to leave, that this was trespassing, that she had no right to be here. She waved a hand like I was being dramatic. "Relax," she said. "We'll be out of here in a couple of hours. No harm done." No harm done? She let herself into my backyard without asking, used my furniture, and invited a bunch of strangers over. I felt this mix of anger and disbelief that I couldn't even put into words. But what really got me? She truly didn't think she had done anything wrong. I tried calling the non-emergency line for the police, hoping someone could talk some sense into her. But when the officer arrived, he said that without visible damage or threats, there wasn't much they could do. Civil dispute, they called it. Karen smiled the entire time. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about it. How someone could invade your personal space so casually, and how powerless I felt watching it happen. I walked through my backyard again after they'd gone. Empty wine cups in the grass. A few cigarette butts near the fence. A chair knocked over. Just enough to remind me it wasn't a dream. The next morning, I spoke to the HOA. And guess what? They were no help star. Told me to work it out neighbor to neighbor. Right, because clearly that was working. But something inside me shifted that day. If Karen thought she could turn my yard into a personal party venue, I was going to show her just how wrong she was. I wasn't just going to reclaim my space. I was going to make a point she, and the whole neighborhood, wouldn't forget. So I started planning. Not just a pushback, but to really pushback. And I knew exactly who to call. The next few days were tense. Every time I looked out my window, I half expected to see another party setting up in my backyard. But things stayed quiet. Karen acted like nothing had happened. She even waved at me when she walked by, like we were old friends. That smug little wave lit a fire in me. But before I could do anything big, I needed to understand what I was dealing with. I pulled out the property records and reviewed the boundary lines. Sure enough, every inch of that yard was legally mine. No HOA shared space nonsense. Just pure, unarguable ownership. That gave me confidence. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. What she did was trespassing, no matter how nicely she decorated. Still, I wanted to be smart. I documented everything, took photos of the trash left behind, saved the text I sent to the HOA, logged the time and date of the party. Even had a few neighbors who saw the event and were willing to back me up. Not that I expected the HOA to care. They never seemed to when Karen was involved. But I wasn't going to leave any room for excuses. Then something odd happened. A few days later, Karen threw another party. This time, thankfully, not in my yard. But it was just one house over, and I noticed something strange. She had moved her decorations into that neighbor's lawn. Folded chairs, colorful streamers, the same speaker system. And guess what? That neighbor wasn't even home. Now I knew it wasn't just me. Karen had a pattern. She found houses where the owners were quiet or away, and she helped herself like she had some kind of open invitation. I decided to talk to a few folks around the block, and what I heard was wild. One neighbor told me she caught Karen trimming her hedges without asking, claiming they looked untidy. Another said Karen once had a birthday party for her dog in someone else's driveway, driveway star, and she just smiled and said it was all in good fun. At this point, it was crystal clear. Karen wasn't clueless. She wasn't just a little overbearing. She was entitled, and she was used to getting away with it. No one had pushed back hard enough. And every time the HOA brushed it off or someone stayed silent, it just confirmed to her that she could do whatever she wanted. Well, not this time. I started thinking seriously about how to make a statement. Not something petty. Not something illegal. Something loud, unforgettable, and completely within my rights. If she wanted to act like my yard was a community park, I was going to give her a public event she'd never forget. One that didn't involve cucumber sandwiches and string lights. One that roared a little louder. It hit me out of nowhere. Bikers. I'd met a few local motorcycle enthusiasts at a charity event months ago. Friendly folks, passionate about riding, and always looking for a place to gather. So I reached out, told them I had a backyard they could use for a rally. Open space, good access, and, most importantly, no Karen. They loved the idea. We picked a date. I told them to bring their bikes, their music, and their community. No wild partying. No damage. Just a loud, proud, beautiful crowd enjoying themselves on my property with my full permission. I even arranged for a food truck and some seating. My yard was about to go from peaceful patch of grass to full-on biker bash. I didn't announce anything. I didn't tell Karen or post about it in the neighborhood group chat. I wanted it to be a surprise, just like her party was for me. The night before the rally, I barely slept. Not from nerves, but from excitement. I couldn't wait to see her face. The lawn she thought was a playground was about to become the loudest corner of the block. I wasn't just taking my yard back. I was doing it with style. Early that morning, I set up a few signs so the bikers knew where to park. And then, right on cue, the deep rumble of engines began rolling down the street. I didn't expect much from the HOA, but I still hoped they would take things seriously. After all, what's the point of having a homeowners association if they can't even step in when someone throws a full party in your yard without asking? So I laid it all out. I sent them an email with pictures, close-ups of the trash left behind, chairs that weren't mine, party decorations strung up across my fence. I even included screenshot from my security camera, which clearly showed Karen setting things up, bringing guests in, and using my backyard like it was hers. I thought it would be enough. Honestly, I thought they'd be shocked. But when I finally got a reply, it was just a copy and paste message. Something like, "We encourage all residents to resolve minor disputes among themselves before requesting formal intervention." Minor dispute? I reread the email 3 times just to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. They called it minor star. A woman invaded my space, threw a party, trashed my yard, and they wanted me to talk it out over coffee? It was almost laughable. I tried calling the HOA office. Left 2 voicemails. No one called me back. A few days later, I saw one of the board members walking their dog. I stopped them and explained everything again in person. They nodded politely, but then said, "You know, Karen's been here a long time. She's very involved in the community." That was all they had to say. I realized then that this wasn't just about Karen. It was about the system that allowed people like her to do whatever they wanted, as long as they smiled and played nice in public. She knew exactly how to push the line just far enough that nobody wanted to deal with it. She knew most people would avoid the headache, but I was done being polite. I spent the next day pacing around the house, looking out the back window, imagining every scenario where this could happen again. What if she did it again next week? What if she brought even more people? What if someone got hurt or something got damaged, and somehow it ended up being my responsibility? I even considered getting a fence installed, but that would have cost thousands of dollars, and I wasn't about to pay that kind of money just to protect myself from a nosy neighbor. I needed something that made a point, something loud enough to make her, and the HOA realized that I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. So I started brainstorming. At first, I thought of hosting my own big party, maybe a noisy barbecue or a weekend DJ set, something that would annoy her just enough to prove a point. But that felt petty, and honestly, I wasn't interested in throwing a party just for revenge. That wasn't my style. Then I remembered a local biker group I met a few months ago at a charity ride. A bunch of really cool people, diverse, respectful, and always down for a good cause. I remembered how loud their bikes were, how they turned heads when they rode through town. And then it clicked. What if I rented my yard out for a biker rally? It was completely legal. It was on my property. And most importantly, it would be unforgettable. I found their Facebook page, sent a message explaining the situation. Not the drama, just that I had a private yard I was willing to rent out for a meetup or social event. Within a few hours, one of the group admins replied. "That sounds awesome," he wrote. "We've been looking for a chill outdoor spot for a meetup. How big is the space?" We went back and forth, worked out the details, and picked a date. They even offered to bring their own chairs and clean up afterward. Totally respectful. As I stood in the yard later that evening, picturing the rumble of bikes filling the street, the sound of engines revving, the laughter and conversation of a group that didn't care about HOA politics, it felt perfect. Not just a rally, a statement. I wasn't just reclaiming my backyard. I was reclaiming control. And no one, not Karen, not the HOA, was going to stop me. The day finally arrived, and I woke up feeling like it was Christmas morning. Not because I was throwing some kind of wild event, but because this was the day I got my backyard back, on my own terms. The biker rally wasn't just about noise or proving a point. It was about reminding people, including myself, that I wasn't going to be walked all over. Not anymore. I started getting everything ready early. Cleaned up the yard, rolled out a few extension cords, double-checked that everything was in place. The food truck I'd coordinated pulled in just before 10 a.m., and parked neatly at the edge of the driveway. A few folding tables and trash bins later, and it was all set. The only thing missing was the sound of engines, and that didn't take long. By 10:30, I heard the first one, a deep rumble in the distance. Then another, and another. Within minutes, a full chorus of motorcycle engines echoed through the neighborhood. Heads started turning. Curtains twitched. Dogs barked. The noise wasn't deafening. It was just loud enough to demand attention. One by one, the bikers started rolling in. All kinds of bikes, Harleys, Yamahas, custom choppers, shiny chrome, matte black, leather jackets, and bandanas. But these weren't wild, reckless people like the movies tried to show. They were organized, polite, and surprisingly chill. Most of them nodded or smiled when they got off their bikes. A couple even introduced themselves. One of them, a guy named Mike, handed me a coffee and said, "Thanks for letting us gather here. This is awesome." I appreciated that more than I can say. The backyard filled up slowly, with riders chatting in small groups, taking pictures of their bikes, sharing stories. The food truck started serving early lunch, burgers, tacos, and cold drinks. Music played from a Bluetooth speaker. Nothing too crazy, just classic rock and a few upbeat tracks. It had the energy of a family picnic, if your family happened to ride motorcycles. And then came Karen. She stepped out of her front door, arms crossed, lips already pursed like she'd bitten a lemon. She scanned the scene, clearly confused at first, trying to make sense of it all. Then she saw me. I waved. She marched across her lawn like she was about to deliver a cease and desist order. "What is this?" she snapped. I stayed calm. "It's a private event," I said. "On my property." "You can't do this," she hissed. "This isn't appropriate for the neighborhood." I didn't even flinch. "It's completely legal. And unlike your party, I got permission from the owner. That's me." She looked around, probably hoping to find someone else who would join her outrage. But no one paid her much attention. A couple of bikers noticed her, but just went back to eating. One of them gave her a polite nod and said, "Nice day for a ride, huh?" She didn't respond. I could see it in her face. She was stunned. This wasn't the reaction she was used to. No one was backing down. No one was apologizing. She wasn't in control. She stormed off without another word. But even that didn't stop the fun. The rally rolled on, and the best part? The atmosphere was completely positive. There was no drama, no shouting, no mess. Just people enjoying themselves in the most respectful way possible. Some of the bikers even picked up trash that had blown into the bushes. These weren't troublemakers. They were guests. Good ones. By the afternoon, a few of my neighbors started wandering over. Not to complain, but to actually join Star. One of them brought their kid over to look at the bikes. Another grabbed a tucko and stayed to chat with a rider about engine mods. I realized then that this wasn't just about pushing back against Karen. It was about showing the neighborhood that it was okay to set boundaries, that you could stand up for yourself without causing chaos. And the best part? Every time someone new walked into my yard, they knew exactly whose space they were in. No confusion. No entitlement. Just respect. This was more than a backyard event. It was a reset, a shift in the energy, a moment that said, "This is my property, and I choose what happens here." As the afternoon rolled on, the energy in my yard was incredible. I'd never seen my space this full of life. There were bikers swapping stories, neighbors chatting like old friends, and the smell of grilled food drifting through the air. It was a kind of community vibe everyone claims to want, but only happens when people actually respect each other. At one point, I stepped back for a moment just to take it all in. My grill, the one Karen had used without asking, was now being run by one of the bikers, flipping burgers like a pro and offering food to anyone nearby. I didn't even ask him to do it. He just saw it sitting there, cleaned it off, and made himself useful. It was that kind of day. No drama. No power plays. Just good people being decent. Of course, Karen wasn't done yet. Around 2 p.m., she reappeared, this time with her phone out. I spotted her standing at the edge of the sidewalk, recording everything. She made sure I saw her, too. It was a classic I'm collecting evidence move. She stood there with a smug look on her face, slowly turning in a circle as if she was building a legal case. I just smiled and waved. A few minutes later, one of the bikers came over and whispered, "She's calling someone." I nodded. "Let her." Sure enough, about 20 minutes later, a police cruiser rolled up. The engine barely had time to cool before Karen power-walked over to the officer, waving her arms like she was trying to flag down a plane. She pointed to the bikes, the food truck, and then right at me. The officer calmly walked over, notebook in hand. "Hi there," he said. "Got a call about some kind of disturbance." "Not from me," I said with a grin, "but I'm happy to talk." He looked around. People were laughing, eating, a couple of kids now admiring the bikes with wide eyes. Nothing out of control, just a gathering on private property. I showed him my ID and the property line on my phone. "Everything you see here is on my land. The food truck's parked legally. We've got trash bins. No noise complaints before now. Everyone's welcome, and no one's causing trouble." The officer nodded slowly. "Yeah, looks pretty chill to me." Then Karen came over, trying to interrupt. "This is not appropriate," she barked. "This is a residential neighborhood. These people don't belong here." That's when the officer looked her square in the eye and asked, "Are they on your property?" Karen hesitated, then said, "No, but—" "Then there's no violation," he cut in gently. "Everything looks in order." I almost laughed. Karen was stunned, speechless. For the first time, she didn't have the last word. The officer gave me a polite nod and said, Just let us know if anything changes. Otherwise, enjoy your day." And with that, he left. Karen stood there for a second, like she didn't know what to do. Then, without another word, she turned and stumped back to her house. I watched her go, not with anger, but with a strange mix of satisfaction and relief. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about clarity. The line had been drawn. She finally understood it wasn't her world, and the rest of us were just living in it. As the sun started to set, the mood only got better. Someone set up a portable fire pit. People gathered around, swapping stories. The bikers, who had shown up expecting just a casual hangout, ended up connecting with the neighborhood more than I ever imagined. One even said, "You should make this a yearly thing." That made me laugh. A yearly biker rally in my quiet little backyard. Who would have thought? But in that moment, it didn't feel crazy. It felt ***. Every bit of that day was a response, not out of spite, but out of strength. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't break any rules. I simply used my space in a way that made a point without saying a word. And somehow, that was louder than anything Karen ever did. After the rally, things around the neighborhood started to feel different. It was subtle at first, like the way the breeze changes just before a storm, but unmistakable once you noticed it. People who had once stayed quiet were now casually chatting about boundaries, respect, and standing up for themselves. I catch neighbors smiling as they pass by, or nodding in understanding when I said hello. It was like a shift had happened, and I was right in the middle of it. Karen, of course, still made her rounds. But instead of the usual confident strut, she seemed more cautious. I caught glimpses of her watching from behind curtains or peeking out when the bikers were around. There was no angry glare this time, just a wary look, like she was reconsidering how much she could push before hitting a hard stop. I heard through the grapevine that she tried talking to a few other neighbors, asking if anyone would back her up against the biker noise. Not a single person volunteered. Some even gently told her they preferred the rally over her surprise parties. That was a satisfying moment, proof that the community was waking up and realizing that no one should be able to treat shared spaces or private yards as their own personal playground. With all the attention the rally had gotten, I realized I had an opportunity. What started as a way to take back my yard was turning into something bigger. I began thinking about ways to build on that energy, to create something that brought people together regularly. Maybe monthly gatherings, small neighborhood events where everyone felt welcome and no one was pushed aside. I reached out to some of the bikers and shared the idea. They loved it and even offered to help organize. I also talked to a few neighbors who were interested in volunteering or pitching in with food and games. Suddenly, what had been a small, quiet block felt like a real community, a place where people looked out for each other and stood up when things went wrong. Of course, it wasn't perfect. There were still occasional grumbles about noise or parking, but those came with genuine conversations and solutions instead of sneers and threats. I found that when you invite people in and show them respect, they usually respond the same way. And Karen? She kept trying to stay involved, but her influence was fading. Without the HOA's blind support, and with neighbors choosing to speak up, her usual tactics didn't work. She started attending some community meetings, but it was clear she was playing defense now. The once powerful Karen was no longer the neighborhood's queen bee. Through it all, I learned a lot about standing your ground, about how important it is to know your rights and not let others steamroll you, about how sometimes the best way to deal with difficult people is not by arguing but by showing them a different way to live, a way that includes respect, boundaries, and a little fun. The rally became more than just a one-time event. It turned into a symbol of change, of reclaiming space and dignity in a place many thought was already set in stone. It was loud, it was proud, and it was a reminder that sometimes you need to shake things up to make things right. And now, every time I walk past my backyard, I don't see a battleground. I see possibility. I see laughter, engines roaring, neighbors coming together, not because they have to, but because they want to. Who would have thought that a little noise and some rumbling bikes could bring so much peace? Since the rally, things have kept evolving in ways I never expected. What started as a single, bold move to reclaim my yard has grown into something that feels bigger than just me or even the neighborhood. There's a new energy now, one that's less about control and more about connection. The bikers didn't just disappear after that day. A few of them became regular faces around the block, dropping by to say hi or help out with small projects. One of them, Lisa, even offered to help me fix a broken fence post that had been bothering me for months. She showed up with tools and a smile, and within an afternoon, the fence looked better than ever. It was a kind of gesture that meant more than just a repair. It was a sign that community was forming in the most unexpected ways. Neighbors who had once seemed distant or cautious started opening up, too. I found myself invited to backyard barbecues, block parties, and casual get-togethers. It felt like the lines that Karen had drawn so rigidly between us were starting to blur. People were connecting over shared interests, not petty disputes. It was as if that one loud, rumbling event had broken some kind of invisible barrier. Karen, however, remained a complicated figure. She didn't come back with more parties or aggressive complaints. Instead, I caught her watching from a distance, sometimes shaking her head in disbelief, other times just staring with a look that said she didn't quite know what to do next. It was like the rally had unsettled her world, and she was still trying to figure out how to regain control, but without success. I heard she tried to organize a neighborhood meeting to address concerns about the biker gatherings. The turnout was weak, mostly people who didn't really know her or support her ideas. At the meeting, the mood was different, more focused on finding ways to coexist, not on shutting things down. Karen's usual influence seemed to be slipping, replaced by a genuine desire to build something better together. That shift in dynamics gave me hope. It showed me that change isn't just possible, it's necessary. Sometimes, it takes a spark to light the fire, and sometimes that spark comes from the most unexpected places. For me, that spark was a backyard full of motorcycles, music, and people who weren't afraid to stand up for themselves. Since then, I've been thinking about what comes next. How to keep that momentum going without losing sight of what made it special. It's tempting to want to keep organizing bigger and louder events, but I'm also learning the value of balance, of knowing when to turn down the volume and let things breathe. The backyard is no longer just my space. It's a gathering place, a spot where people come to share stories, celebrate milestones, or just relax after a long day. I've learned that boundaries don't have to be walls. They can be open gates, inviting the right kind of energy while keeping out the chaos. What started as a battle over a yard has turned into a lesson in community, in how we can reclaim our space not by fighting harder, but by inviting others in on our terms, by standing firm but also being open, by showing that respect is a two-way street. And honestly, that feels like a victory bigger than any complaint letter or angry confrontation. It feels like progress. Every time I see a group of riders roll up, or hear laughter coming from the porch, or spot a neighbor lending a hand, I'm reminded that change doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes, it just has to be real.